Hey guys, this video I'm going to look at how enterprise bargaining can in fact help or even hinder the goal of strong and sustainable economic growth. So we're going to split this lecture or this video into two parts. First we're going to look at the positive relationship between enterprise bargaining and strong and sustainable growth. And secondly we're going to look at some cases where enterprise bargaining may in fact lead to a very long-term weak or unsustainable growth in the long term. So first we're going to look at how enterprise bargaining can help achieve this goal of strong and sustainable growth. So before we go into that, we're going to go into the definition of strong and sustainable growth, so we can tick off each pillar as we achieve it. So strong and sustainable growth is achieved as when economic growth is around 3 to 4% each year. 3 to 4% GDP. So GDP each year increases by 3 to 4%. That's recognized at the moment, recognized by the government to be around 3 to 4%. And at 3 to 4%, this means that low inflation is achieved. Low inflation, around 2 to 3% CPI, over the average of the business cycle, is achieved. Also means sustainability, so that we don't deplete natural resources. This comes back to the idea of intertemporal efficiency. And if you want to remind yourselves what intertemporal efficiency or the other different types of efficiency actually are, I'd encourage you to look at the lecture on the types of efficiency that the aggregate supply side policies target. And lastly, strong and sustainable growth promotes efficiency. So there's the 4 different pillars that we're going to look at, that we're going to tick off gradually as we talk about enterprise bargaining and its relationship with strong and sustainable growth. So as we know, enterprise bargaining links wages or wage levels, wages with productivity. So as individual labourers, as they become more productive, this means that they would in fact get paid a higher wage. So as a result, this would mean, theoretically, that because they have aligned interests, so employers want higher wages and producers want higher productivity, this means due to aligned interests, wage prices would increase and productivity would increase as well. And since productivity is aligned with this idea of efficiency, we can tick that off, and it is also aligned with this idea of strong economic growth, so we can tick that off. So perhaps you're going to say, okay, so when wages increase, wouldn't that actually undermine the achievement of low inflation here? Well, yes, in some cases it does. When income increase, that would mean we have more to spend, and that would push up demand inflation. However, if we look at the productivity side of the argument, we notice that aggregate demand here is C plus I plus G plus net exports. And even though consumption expenditure does increase, even though that does increase, and aggregate demand does increase, we're saying that productivity actually increases along with it. So any increase in aggregate demand is met with increases to aggregate supply. And these enterprise bargaining agreements should reflect that. They should reflect that aggregate supply meets, or aggregate demand meets, or aggregate supply. So as a result, we can say that low inflation is also achieved. And if you want a deeper or a more thorough understanding of how low inflation is related to enterprise bargaining, again, look at the relationship between enterprise bargaining and low inflation. We go through demand for inflation and cost for inflation, and how enterprise bargaining can achieve both in both the long and the short runs. Okay, so we can tick off low inflation. Thirdly, we need to tick off the non-depletion of natural resources. So we better not deplete our natural resources so that we keep our intergenerational efficiency going. So we don't want to use all our resources now. We want to preserve them for the future so that future generations can enjoy a reasonable or even a better standard of living than we do at the moment. So how does that help the sustainability of our growth? The sustainability part of our growth. What this suggests is that in cases of high productivity, maybe we have, say, 1 unit of natural resources. So we need coal, we need fuel, we need whatever natural resources that are non-renewable to produce 1 unit of goods. And that was previously before this enterprise bargaining. But now that enterprise bargaining has been introduced, it could in fact be 1 unit helps produce, say, 2 units. And so what this means is that the production rate of these firms have become more efficient in utilizing these natural resources, because this may be tied to their enterprise bargaining agreements anyway. So it suggests that as employees or as firms try to improve their productivity, that means they are using less resources or fewer resources relative to their unit of output. And so that in that long-winded example, in that very indirect way, natural resources or intertemporal efficiency can be achieved. But primarily what enterprise bargaining helps achieve is this idea of allocative as well as productive efficiency, or technical, as some people know, technical or allocative efficiencies. They're the main types of efficiencies that that enterprise bargaining helps achieve, which in turn helps a strong and sustainable rate of economic growth. So now we've looked at the positives the positive relationship between economic growth and enterprise bargaining. We're going to look at some of the negatives. The major negative that comes to mind is the idea of this better off test. Better off test. And so for those earning less than $108,300 per year, they have to pass this rigorous test so that the 5 basic pillars of Fair Work Australia have to be met or exceeded for that enterprise bargaining agreement to pass Fair Work Australia. So what this means is that this would tend to slow down real unit labour costs in the long run, especially for those who are earning less than $108,300. So in this case, real unit labour costs may tend to increase because of these strict and rigorous rules imposed by Fair Work Australia in order to promote efficiency, in order to promote equity. And again, we come back to this idea that there is a trade-off between equity now and efficiency. So Fair Work Australia is trying to protect these low-income earners by imposing all these different rules and regulations so that they get the best deal possible where they have little bargaining power. So as a result, real unit labour costs may actually increase, and that would tend to slow down labour productivity. So as a result, the future sustainable rate of economic growth may be weaker. So that's the only major weakness, or the primary reason, or the primary weakness enterprise bargaining has in achieving strong and sustainable growth. But as we can see from all these different other arguments, enterprise bargaining is beneficial in the long run to achieve this government economic goal of strong and sustainable economic growth.